Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to another episode of ATACS, Adults Talk About Cool Stuff. I am your host today, Flex, as our regular host Paul is not here. It is December 16th, 2017. This is ATACS episode 28 and will be our last regular episode of calendar year 2017. Joining me today are Will from Greenville. How are you doing, Will?
I'm pretty good. I can't believe we made it to the end of 2017.
I know, just a whole nother year.
There were so many politics, and there were so many games that I didn't think we were going to be able to pull it out in the end.
I mean, those are pretty much the two biggest threats to mankind. So somehow made it.
Yeah.
Also surviving 2017 is Ryan from New York.
Now, what Will forgot is that our GO2I podcast is coming up, and it's looking like our biggest panel yet. So we may not make it that far past 2017.
That's the most dangerous game. Yes, as Ryan alluded to, this is our last regular episode of ATACS, but in roughly 2 weeks' time, we will be doing a special Game of the Year 2017 podcast. So look forward to that. Or don't look forward to that? I don't know. We're going to do it one way
Something
or the other.
like that.
But before that, we're here to talk about some games we've been playing in recent weeks. We have a slightly smaller crew, but a powerful crew nonetheless. And first, want to ask Will what he's been playing. And I guess to start it off, I know you finished Wolfenstein II in the past 2 weeks, and what did you think Wolfenstein 2?
Well, and I'm echoing some things that I've told you privately, but the one thing that I think Wolfenstein 2 does amazingly well, I think Wolfenstein 2 is an absolute masterclass in tone. I think, and I've read certain articles that have sort of diverged from this viewpoint, that did not feel that, Wolfenstein 2 really nailed the tone, that maybe some of the goofier scenes undercut some of the more serious tones and some of the, I guess what you might even call like real world parallels of what they're talking about. I mean, this is a game that explores, of course, what creates a Nazi and, how people would act, or, hypothesizes about how people might act if Nazis were to take over the country. There's a lot of pieces in terms of like civil rights types of issues going on in here. There's like abuse. There are a lot of serious things that like domestic abuse and spousal abuse. There's a lot of serious themes that it touches. And I think that it could have very easily gone off the rails.
Yeah.
But to me, I don't know if it was the way that the game was paced or the way that the different scenes were sort of, I guess, couched in a sense, like what came before and after them. But I never felt, nothing felt disingenuous to me, and nothing felt, now I will say the very beginning of the game, I felt like was a little bit shock value-ish.
I could see that.
Almost immediately, there's a character that gets beheaded, and, the head is sort of, I don't know, put on display. And to me, that was a little bit like too much of the ultraviolence, so to speak.
Right.
But, and so I guess in some ways, maybe that particular, the disgustingness of that scene didn't feel earned, perhaps.
Yeah. Because the game's pretty violent overall, but I think you're right that a lot of the other scenes kind of earn it more.
Yeah. And I don't even know what I mean necessarily by earning. I guess it's like once you've seen what a dirty world that you're in, maybe it's a little easier for some of these scenes for you to swallow some of these scenes. But in some ways, it's that along with a certain scene that takes place in space. They're pretty nasty. They're pretty much some of the nastiest scenes in the game. So
yeah,
this is every time I hear about Wolfenstein 2, like you hear this like people like micro analyzing this ultra weighty stuff, and then it's like oh, by the way, this thing took place in space, or like
And that's
heads
exactly
exploding.
what I'm getting at. Like,
Yeah.
that's the crazy thing.
I think that's what makes it great.
I mean, like this, you hear this, they're like, you're used to your white, strong soldier protagonist being somebody like Duke Nukem or something, where he's just reveling in it, and, this particular character, I mean, even though he's like a big meathead, he says things like, you know, he's worried about like his unborn children, or he doesn't know if he wants to get close to somebody because, they may or may not, he may not be around too much longer.
Yeah, because he might get shot and killed by a Nazi in the next hour.
Yeah, and so it's a lot deeper than you'd really expect it to be, and so I think that was what I thought was very good about it. I think the things that I didn't enjoy as much, I think the level design wasn't particularly good. I think the difficulty is a little brutal sometimes, just because things seem to happen so fast in the game. Like there are these commanders. I probably mentioned this before, but there are these commanders that as soon as they see you, enemies just pour out from everywhere. It's just like the ceiling, the floor, like the doors, everywhere. And so sometimes it feels really hard to kind of get a handle on those scenes, or to really get a handle on what you need to be doing when that sort of thing goes down.
Yeah, stuff can kind of just turn on like really quickly, and then it's just chaos.
Yeah, and I think you can, of course, you can get rid of that if you're able to sort of be stealthy and take out these commanders in a stealthy way, but some of them are a lot more straightforward or obvious about ways to take them out. Some of them seems a lot harder to actually get to them stealthily. Like you would have to sneak by sneak by or kill like 6 or 7 dudes stealthily to actually get to the commander so that you could take him down before someone raises the alarm. And as soon as anybody sees you, or as soon as you make any kind of noise, even if you kill the guy almost immediately, like somehow the commander already knows and he's already calling in his buds.
Yeah. It's like the second you break stealth, like to even the smallest degree, those alarms are going off.
And so that made it a little rough. I also feel like some of the level design was rough. I mean, there were some times that I could not figure out where to go, and I remember just kind of I knew that there was a commander on the other side of the wall that I was supposed to go through, but I couldn't figure out how to get through. And so I just made a lot of racket. and somehow some guy started shooting me through the ceiling, a place that I didn't really realize that I could go. And then I think he might have broken a grate or something, but I was able to figure out kind of where to go just by like, oh, a guy just shot me from up there. I must be able to get up there. But there were 2 or 3 times, and at one point it was just like, where is section F on the ship? You need to go to section F. And oh my God, I looked around the whole ship like 4 times. And finally I found it was like down in some locker rooms, like behind a corner.
Yeah, the ship is kind of confusing in general. Like they give you waypoints for that stuff, but the ship is like...
I didn't find the waypoint until I was like already basically in the locker room that it was in.
Oh, weird. Huh.
Yeah, so I don't remember having a waypoint. So that was kind of a little rough.
I only remember getting like really turned around once, and it was later in the game, and it was like a really big room that I just couldn't find the exit to. The stealth stuff was interesting. It was like whenever I got into like an area, it was either like, oh, this, and you kind of alluded to this. It's like, oh, this is like, I see the stealthy approach here, and I would get through it being stealthy. Or it'd be like, I do not see the stealthy approach here, and then it would be whip out the double shotguns and go to town.
Go to town, indeed. I like some of the big heavy weapons in the game. Like there was this weapon that like could supposedly like melt certain types of metal, and it could also kind of melt the armor of your enemies.
And that thing was fun. There
were like recharge stations on the wall that you could like go and recharge your battery for your face melter or whatever.
Yeah.
And
anytime I found one of those things, I kept it for as long as I could.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was with it. But overall, I guess like, I didn't feel like it did a ton that was necessarily novel with the gameplay.
I'd
I
agree with
think I
that.
was just most impressed with just the way that it sort of balanced the tone, almost like on the edge of a knife. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
going from the most ludicrous things you could possibly imagine to things that were relatively heartfelt and touching.
Yeah, it somehow made that balance work where it could have serious subject matter but present it through absurd scenarios in an absurd tone a lot of the times, that in some ways like almost made it more effective by being absurd.
Yeah,
And I don't
yeah.
really know how they pulled it off, but
And I mentioned to you before, and this may not mean anything to anybody who listens to this podcast, but in my opinion, like Metal Gear Solid 5 is the absolute antithesis, the absolute worst at doing this, in my opinion. It's just sort of like
yeah.
trying to actually bring a sense of seriousness while also sort of doing something kind of goofy
Mhm.
or something, and it just, it never clicks to me. I mean, it's almost like hearing, like playing Metal Gear Solid 5, and I've tried to describe this before, but it's basically, it's kind of like hearing like an uncomfortable high pitched noise for a long period of time. Like it's because everything seems so bizarre and off about it.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like someone of a different species made that game.
Yeah, well, that might not be too far off from the truth.
But yeah, so that's a game, I guess, just in terms of contrasting it, but from Wolfenstein 2, a game that
Yeah.
I feel like really misses tone.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of that could be like, because I think Wolfenstein 2 is incredibly well written and well acted.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think the scenes that play out with the characters like are just really well made scenes.
Right. Right.
Whereas a lot of Metal Gear is like, I don't know, it's for lack of better words, it's really goofy anime.
I mean, I haven't played Wolfenstein, but and one of the reasons the Metal Gear series kind of lost me around number 4 is because I like the earlier entries. I guess Metal Gear, it sounds like, it's very almost like detailed and historic in the moment to moment, but then you get to the big set piece moments and it just like loses it. And it gets very like anime and out of touch with reality, and a lot of times like out of touch with human emotion. Like it just becomes this like over dramatized, over glorified mess. Which I felt like the first game in particular didn't do that. Like it felt like it stayed a little more grounded to the point. But maybe that's like the opposite, kind of the opposition, is that Wolfenstein is just like, we're just going to make this a fun game, kind of ridiculous, but then like have in the set piece moments, we're actually going to, treat these like real people.
Right. Right. And I think there's like something, and I think it would lend itself to a larger explanation, but there's something to this concept of like earning the moment, like one of the quintessential moments of the last generation that was what you might call quote unquote unearned, was this particular scene. I believe it was like in a Call of Duty game, and it kind of became a meme. It was like press X to pay respects. I don't know if you guys remember this. But
yeah, that was
me,
from
like
Advanced Warfare, I think.
that sounds right. But it's like, that's like the epitome of this sort of like you didn't do the work to create the characters to have this scene work the way you want it to. You know what I mean? And I feel like Wolfenstein 2 does the work. Even though there's a lot of goof in there, it does the work.
Yeah. Then there's definitely a lot of goof and it gets absurd, but yeah, I think you're totally right that it does the work and has the payout. Like the story, I think, is pretty well constructed, and like it feels like it's like it has a path that it's going through, like a trajectory, and it makes sense and it's cohesive.
Actually, I don't even think I would need to spoil anything, and I'll stop talking about Wolfenstein here in a minute. But like, there's a particular scene where you fight a lot of Nazis, and I won't go into too much detail, but it's probably one of the absolute, from what I've read, one of the hardest fights in the whole game.
Yeah, if you're talking about the one I'm thinking you're talking about around the middle of the game, it is definitely the hardest thing for me, at least. And
that, I think that was purposeful, because basically the carpet kind of gets pulled out from underneath you, and you realize that was kind of all a dream. You know, and I don't think I'm really spoiling anything by not saying anything else about that, other than there's some scene in the game that's a dream. But because I think it lends to a sense of helplessness that moment already kind of has. I remember reading an article about this that really kind of resonated with me. You know, to sort of make you feel the depth of helplessness that the character feels in that moment, like that particular sequence kind of lends itself to it, especially because it is so hard fought. But that's the sort of like kind of quote unquote masterstroke that you might see in the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you enjoyed it overall.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot. I mean, I just see so many games that I think flub that tone that it's really impressive to see them hit it.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So I think the other thing I've been playing, right? That's AAA.
Yeah. So you sent me a message last night after I had gotten off.
I did,
and I saw it this morning, and it seems like you're having some problems with XCOM 2, Mr. Will.
Yeah, I'd say so.
What's going on, Will?
I missed this. So go ahead. Just stab me in the heart, Will. Right in the heart.
Thing. All right, I tried playing XCOM 2 maybe a month or two ago, maybe that long, I don't know, but it was a while ago, and I put maybe 8 hours into it. I was playing it on like the veteran difficulty because it said if you have some XCOM experience, play it on the veteran difficulty. I ran into a couple of things that I found just really kind of off-putting in terms of just dealing with like endless reinforcements, dealing with enemies that were very, very powerful, dealing with time limits, and I kind of moved away from it. And I started back again within the past 2 weeks playing on the lower difficulty, like the lowest difficulty they allow you to play. And I think I kind of eventually ran into the same issue. Just dealing with, I think the nail in the coffin for me was a mission where I was trying to rescue civilians, but I was fighting the bugs that can make more of themselves. And so like the bugs were going around killing civilians and turning the civilians into more enemies.
The chrysalids?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And so I guess to me the thing is like I like and I wrote a review about this. I like the loop, you know, going out, fighting the aliens, getting the new equipment, the abilities, researching, fighting the harder groups of aliens and more dense groups of aliens. I like the funky, ominous kind of feel of the whole game, the whole kind of scrappy sort of, you know, you're fighting for the future of humanity type of thing. But in my view, and I'm sure there might be a little static here, I don't think XCOM 2 is a good strategy game. I think XCOM 2 is a good game, but I do not think you ever have the information and really have the ability to plan in a way that would make it a good strategy game. I guess I feel like every time, like with certain strategy games I've played, and I've played a lot of these turn-based things, you know, the first XCOM, your Shadowruns, Banner Sagas, Divinity Original Sins, Invisible Ink. I've played a lot of these things, and I guess with this one, like I never felt like, oh, well, let me go back to the drawing board and find a new strategy. Like I always felt like I basically did the best thing I could do in whatever moment it was. I think you just kind of have to, I think if you like this game, then you like reacting. You're like, because most of the game is just reacting to just whatever happens. And I think that you have to be one of these people who really acknowledges that you're going to lose some troops and you probably couldn't have done anything about it, and that you're going to have to make decisions with incomplete information often. And I guess like if you go into it, I think with that sort of understanding, you're going to like it, but that's just not what I want in a game. Like I never felt like I could really come up with a new strategy or something. I always felt like, oh, okay. And so it always just went to this place where I was just sort of, and I've mentioned this the last time I talked about the game, where I was just like almost just cheering for the aliens. I was like, yeah, blow his head off. Yeah, go ahead, shoot him. Go ahead. Yeah, just take him out. You know? And I felt like with other strategy games, like I feel like, oh, okay, well, there's something that I didn't get there, or there's something I could try, or maybe I need to try this sort of thing. But I just never feel that way in XCOM 2. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it is in there at some point. Like if I dug really, really deep into those systems, I mean, the last time I was using like, gas grenades and flashbang grenades and different types of upgrades and just anything I could really sort of think of as I was going through that might kind of help me with some of these guys. But I don't know. I guess I felt like a lot of the plans I made in the game also, like I would start some sort of research and then like 2 days would happen and then there'd be some sort of mission. And then two more days would go by, some other mission would come up, and neither one of them, XCOM was like, you should not skip this. You need to do this. And then I'll get done with it. And like by the time my research gets finished, it's barely relevant. And then like I'll come up with a plan. I'm like, well, I want to go and unlock that region and assault that base. And it was like so many things were constantly interrupting me all the time. And I kept getting different demands. It was like, oh, I didn't know this was going to be an issue, but now I'm like totally out of intel because of X, Y, and Z, or totally out of money because I needed to buy soldiers because that last mission messed me up. Like, so I guess I feel like I never get to really plan anything. I guess I just feel like it's all reacting. So, it's just not my thing,
So,
But
did you feel that at all in Enemy Unknown? Because you liked Enemy Unknown quite a bit, if I remember right.
yeah, I did. I don't.
So does it feel different to you than that did?
Yeah, I think it does. And it's hard for me to exactly, put my finger on what's going on.
I mean, the biggest obvious difference are the turn timers, but it doesn't sound like that's your only issue with XCOM 2.
Yeah, and maybe, I guess, I remember reading this sort of article that was saying like, like at the very end, I think it was like within 2 weeks of the release, like apparently the developer or one of the lead developers or designers on the game was like, we need to turn this up to 11. Like, people aren't engaging with our systems the way we want them to. So apparently they make the game significantly harder within like the 2 weeks prior to release. And they've actually gone on record, like interviewing and talking about that as to whether or not that was a good move or not. But I thought that you guys might appreciate the last thing I kind of wrote in the interview, which was, I said, though I'm not religious, I've heard the phrase, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. I feel like the same thing could be said about XCOM 2. If you want to make XCOM 2 laugh, tell him about your plans. I said, but that's just kind of, I guess that's just kind of how I felt about it. Maybe I just need a little bit more like causality in my game. Like I know if I do this, this is going to happen. And I guess between like reinforcements, like I didn't know about, enemies I hadn't seen before, just maybe I just didn't feel like I could plan the way I wanted to.
Yeah, and I know you do like to plan, and XCOM 2 is pretty chaotic.
Yeah. But not, like I said, I don't think it's a bad game. I just think that I'm not really the person, I'm not the one it's for. And not every game has to be for everybody,
You don't need every game to be for you, Will?
I mean, it's definitely a challenging game, and like, I mean, I enjoyed it a lot when I played it in 2016, but replaying the DLC, which the DLC makes it even more chaotic, which I don't think it needs, but I felt like I had kind of gotten my fill of it. And I mean, some of those complaints are valid. Like I did notice when I was replaying that it's hard. The game is 2 parts, right? It's the turn-based strategy battles and kind of the overworld campaign. But in the overworld campaign, that's kind of your break sometimes from battles, but it's always pulling you into more stuff. And like, it's very difficult to say no, because if you're not winning basically every single battle, like your campaign can run off the rails pretty quickly. But as far as the actual turn-based strategy goes, I mean, I definitely had to play a warm-up round to get a sense of all the mechanics. Like I played 2 playthroughs, and the first one was just learning a lot about the game. But I felt like, I do feel like it is a strategy game. I mean, it does force you to adapt a lot, but things you do about like staying in cover, watching your line of sight, like setting up your snipers, like using all your toolkits, whether it's your rangers, are you going to use the more consistent sword, or are you going to use the more powerful shotgun? Like, they give you all these options and tools, and like constantly, you're constantly making like in the moment decisions about, do you conserve your grenades or use them for guaranteed damage? Like it gives you a lot of tools in your toolkit, and you just kind of have to
I'm saying, like, I mean, and the thing is, like, I think maybe when you were playing the game and one of your guys died or you got ambushed or something, like your mind went there. Your mind went to, well, like, is there something I could be doing different? Should I use the shotgun? Should I use the sword? Should I use the grenade? And I mean, whether I was making the ideal decisions or not, I just never, after playing this game for almost 20 hours, I still never really felt like it mattered that much, I guess, what I was doing. Like, I just felt like some of the things, like, the particular instance which happened, which happens a lot in the game is, you have to rescue a guy, let's say you have to rescue whoever, some VIP, and you get to where, like, oh, well, I've only got like 3 turns to get to him and I'm still a little ways away. It's like at that point, you're not going to get to him without dashing. And a lot of the time, not every time, but a lot of the time, you'll dash into a situation where there are enemies, like, and you can sort of maybe dash with half of them or maybe hold some of them back, but in some ways you're kind of forced to get reckless. And I guess in those instances, I was like, come on, but I guess, I mean, I think it's a taste thing. I mean, maybe you felt the strategy in it, whereas I didn't kind of quite feel it that same way.
Deep thoughts on XCOM 2.
Deep thought. Emotional responses.
Yeah, I won't read your emotional message you sent me last night.
You can if you want. I mean, I don't know if we're an R-rated podcast. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there's some expletives in there. Yeah, I mean, I liked XCOM 2 a lot, but I do recognize that it is very chaotic and reacting in the moment. And like a lot of times I do enjoy the like moment to moment split decision making. And that can go a ways towards making the alien threat feeling just as threatening as it is. I mean, I did have some problems with XCOM 2. Like, I think the randomized research reward is like a step too far in the randomness for me.
Right.
So some things like that, but I think I'm somewhere in between you two guys on
Right.
the extreme ends.
Right. Well, and one thing it was interesting to see with the DLC this year, like, I felt like they kind of took that campaign and added more to it, and that was just way too much. Like,
yeah, I mean, that campaign's already long.
I think they should have either tried to kind of pare things back a little bit and maybe make it more grounded, or turn it up to 11 but make it really short. Like, I think
Right.
Nate was kind of bouncing out those ideas, and I kind of agree with him. I think with like a DLC like they did, they put some cool ideas in there, but I think they should have either taken some things out or, just made it kind of short and chaotic. Like,
Yeah.
But anyway, it's
tough to have like a 40+ hour game that's kind of roguelike-ish in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the only other 2 things, and I'll just touch on these briefly because I've already been running my mouth along. One is a game called One Night Stand, which it's it's a pretty simple game. It's relatively cheap, but it's sort of, I don't know what you'd even call it. I guess it's sort of like I don't know if you call it like a walking simulator or whatever. But basically, you play a man who wakes up beside a woman, and you get the feeling that you have had a one night stand with this woman. And
newsflash,
yeah, you sort of try and have a conversation with her, and you can sort of choose at any time. You can sort of choose to try and leave. You can sort of try and get to know her. You can snoop around, but it becomes clear that, like, just as you who are playing the game, don't know much about the situation. Apparently, the character you're playing was sort of was pretty drunk the night before.
I was about to say, did they like have amnesia or something? Or
well, yeah, he was just got really drunk and he doesn't remember anything that happened. And so, like, it's kind of interesting in the way that you can sort of kind of play it different ways. There's like, I think there's something like, there are multiple endings. I just played it once and just tried to kind of do the things that I thought I would do it if I was in that situation, so I tried not to snoop, and I didn't like leave as soon as I could. I tried to get to know her, but it's kind of tough too, because I think she remembers more about what happened than you did.
Right.
And so like you kind of offend her if you're like, I don't remember anything. What's your name? So it's actually, I just thought it was pretty well done and kind of unique. I mean, it was very much like a vignette,
Yeah.
but I think
How long
enough was
was
put
it?
in. It took me about 30 minutes, maybe 45
Oh,
minutes.
okay.
But I think it puts so much into the situation that it gives you a decent amount of flexibility in how you handle it. It's not just sort of like, well, you can either be friends or you can just leave. Like, I mean, it seems like there are, a handful of different ways you can kind of handle it. And so it's kind of interesting. And it's also the animation of the girl is pretty good. It's kind of stylized and cartoony in a sense, but
Yeah, I'm looking at some screenshots right now.
but at the same time, like some of the things that you say and some of the things that she says, like really kind of strike a chord. It doesn't sound like manufactured. I mean, the dialogue is pretty good. And so I thought it was really interesting to kind of, whenever she made those sorts of like kinds of faces in reaction to some of the things that you said, it kind of brought a little bit more groundedness, I guess you might say, to what was going on. But either way,
Yeah.
I just thought it
So
was
you
a
enjoyed
neat
it?
thing. Yeah, I thought it was a neat thing.
Yeah. Seems interesting.
But yeah, so that was one. The other thing I played recently was something that Mr. Flex mentioned on our last podcast, which was Doki Doki Literature Club.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something. Like, I was told
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, I was told that, William, you like Pony Island and stuff like that, so maybe you'll like this game. And
I want to emphasize the maybe there, because you never know for sure.
and I think one of the things that was interesting, I think it was doing some really kind of interesting things with the game. I guess the main overarching idea of it is that you're a high schooler. You've got a close friend who's a girl who lives next door, and she urges you to join a club, and she's pushing you specifically towards joining the literature club.
So should we spoiler alert anything?
I don't think any of this is really anything big. I mean, you can read this kind of stuff in the description.
Okay.
And then it says like, which of these girls do you want to go for? So I think it plays a little bit into kind of the fantasy, because I think if you're playing one of these games, like a dating game, so to speak, I think that it's almost like you're looking for a certain type of girl, like in a way. And so I think that they're actually,
did you write some good poems?
I hated those things, but apparently,
pretty bad.
Apparently, the different girls, and I don't know anything about Japanese culture, but apparently, these different girls actually have names. Like one of them is Natsuki, who's she's very, very childish and cutesy. But apparently, there's some sort of Japanese words. I don't know what it's called, but apparently that means just someone's well, I didn't like the. Or I always like the blah 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 type of girl.
Like a tsundere type thing,
there you go.
Unhealthy relationship, extremely caring, but then it becomes jealous and unhealthy. They have these archetypal.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
and so
gotcha.
I think I might have gotten more out of the game had I known that what it was playing off of a little bit more, because I don't know those things.
The first half of the game, it's kind of being a stereotypical tropey Japanese dating sim,
anime dating sim.
Yeah, but it also seems to be kind of doing it with a slight wink and nod, kind of a knowing way, and kind of playing on those tropes.
But I think if I knew the tropes, I feel like maybe I would have gotten a little more out of it. And the game itself, the gameplay is pretty simple.
And maybe kind of bad.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dialogue that you have to listen to. A lot of it kind of duplicate times. You quote unquote write these poems by just clicking on words that seem to appeal to the girl that you're trying to attract.
The poems are really goofy.
Yeah.
At some point in the game, I just started clicking through them really quickly.
but
like not paying any attention.
But I guess like to me, it's I like the sort of fourth wall stuff, but
yeah, that's the stuff I was thinking you might like.
Yeah, I like that stuff a little bit. I think with the game itself, though, like there was a part of me that felt like weirdly skeezy and maybe even a little bit like, I don't know, like above it. But
like you were playing a dating sim?
Maybe.
With anime schoolgirls?
Maybe so. But like, for instance, like I almost felt like in my mind, and I guess maybe this is because I'm a counselor, and I mean, some of the things that were going on, I was like, this might be the right decision. And I'm like, this probably won't occur to anybody in this game. and then of course it didn't. And I was just sort of like watching it had it happen. I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to go down. So I guess to me, like, it was hard for me to really get, I guess, like immersed in it, because there are some games that I think they pull your leg and you kind of see them reaching for your leg. And then other games, it's almost like they pull things out from under you. And maybe I knew too much about it. I mean, maybe it's hard to actually just have a game like this, without knowing a little bit about it's going to be funky, something weird's going to go down.
I think this game is most effective if you don't know anything about it, but that's also hard because like none of us are like, I wouldn't like, none of us are going to go play a Japanese looking dating sim if you don't know anything else about it. Like
the most popular user-defined tag for the product is psychological horror. And of course, now we've learned with Garfield Kart that user tags don't always mean what they say.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think that is an excellent representation of the Cold War.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think maybe it's hard to like go into it completely cold without knowing anything about it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the appeal in that game is when it becomes what it, something different from what it looks like on paper. But yeah, if you kind of already know that it's going to be something different, then that probably reduces the impact.
But yeah, it's definitely like a Steam darling now. Like it's crazy how, like, I mean, like the game I just talked to you guys about, One Night Stand. Like, I mean, it's got like 289 like reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Like Doki Doki Literature Club has almost 41,000.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, so it really...
It probably helps that it's free, too, but...
Yeah, but I mean, it blew up, man.
It really did. Yeah, I mean, it was like I tried it because I kept, like, it was unavoidable at some point. It was like, I just kept hearing stuff about it everywhere.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, that was most of my thoughts. I mean, I can't say... can't say I really liked it, and I felt like it was a little long, but I thought it was doing something pretty interesting. I mean, and it was so funny that like right after I played it, I talked to Flex about maybe doing a clicker where we subverted things. So like, maybe you have a clicker where whenever you leave your computer, somehow the game can tell that you've left your computer, and people start just doing things completely differently than what you actually left them on the job, So if it's like a mining clicker where you're trying to like mine gold, like one of your guys goes and starts murdering crew members with a pickaxe instead of mining the gold, and you come back and your whole little operation has been sabotaged.
Yeah.
So I think there's something cool about sort of like subverting these tropes. But I guess I think it would be better if I knew the tropes and the gameplay was a little better.
Both of those would help for sure.
But anyway.
The gameplay's pretty bad. Yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat as you, where it's like I think they were doing interesting stuff,
right?
But it's hard to like try and, because it's like you kind of have to not know what's coming and know the tropes it's playing with, and like there's kind of a lot of stuff going on there that feeds into the experience.
Right. But yeah, that's all I had.
Cool. So, Mr. Ryan, I believe you have finished a pretty chunky game lately.
Yeah, it ended up being a little chunkier than I expected. I kind of push through the ending a bit. I just finished playing Prey today, actually. I kind of wrapped up that last
Prey
segment.
was a game released on the Xbox 360 in 2006. So it's been a while. It took you a while to get around to it, but how'd you like it?
Are we talking about the same game here?
I kid.
How much time
there's
did you
multiple
spend
games
in
with the same
spirit
name.
world? Did you spend a lot of time in the spirit world?
You could say I spent all of the time in the spirit world.
For clarification, Ryan is actually talking about 2017's Prey.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Is it what Bathroom Scrounger, BioShock clone? I don't know what our
immersive sim.
Okay, we'll go with that.
That's kind of the broadly accepted term, for better or worse.
Yeah, I guess my overall thoughts on Prey are, I did like it. I think there's a pretty good game in there. I did, and I liked some of the setting, and some of the kind of, I guess the detail that I think we've talked about in previous podcasts. Although I would say that's kind of with an asterisk. Although I overall enjoyed the game and I liked some of the story beats and like some of the ideas it played around with, and some of those detailed moments, even though that's, I'm not as much of an immersive sim like BioShocky kind of guy. I also felt like a couple things. I felt like the pace and storytelling is a little hard to get right in those kind of open-ended first-person shooters, and I definitely felt some of that. Like, there are times where things get quiet or you spend a lot of time like kind of dragging through hallways and things like that, and then suddenly you get like a story dump. And the other thing too is I feel like it's a game with some cool mechanics and ideas that I guess it doesn't execute them all in the way that you would hope, and at times it feels like the game is maybe at odds with itself. So in terms of gameplay, that's things like, I would say, like for example, you're on a space station and sometimes you do a little bit of spacewalking, and I thought that gameplay, the spacewalking gameplay, I actually thought was pretty cool and thematic, but then if you have to do any kind of combat in space, it's just horrible. The talent trees I felt like were kind of a little bit misleading. And, some talents are strictly better than others. And if you make the wrong decisions, that can kind of color your experience. The sound and music, like, for example, sometimes it was pretty good, but then sometimes like the game would be playing this like screechy, clicky, like alien sounding soundtrack. And, you're sneaking through hallways, like trying to carefully listen for sounds of aliens, in case like something's going to pop out of a vase and kill you.
Gotta watch out for those vases.
It just does things like that, which I got kind of annoyed with throughout my playthrough. Like, for example, I almost turned the music in the game off just because I found that so irritating. So I had a number of those kind of, I think nitpicking would be underplaying it a little bit, but I had a number of those kind of frustrations with Prey but overall I think it's a pretty cool game. Like, it does some fun stuff. And I mostly like the way it wrapped up too. You guys want to jump in on any of that?
Yeah, so I'm also playing Prey right now, and I'm probably, 6, 7, 8-ish hours in. That game's a hard one to measure progress because it is somewhat open. But I think that game has a really rough opening. I think there's this weird hump at the beginning where like you spend a few hours and like kind of all you have is a wrench. At least for me, like I had a shotgun but no ammo. And once I got some fabricator plans to like make some shotgun shells and to make the neuromods, Like some of those fabricator plans really open things up because I was like, in those first few hours, I was like collecting a bunch of materials and I had like nothing to use them on. So it felt like I was kind of scrounging for nothing. And that game is a whole lot of scrounging.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of one of my main questions because both of you have finished it. And like now that I've gotten over that initial hump and I feel like I have a few more options under my belt and like ways to tackle situations, it's still something about the pacing or variety of that game feels a little more one note than I feel like some of the other games in this mold. Like I played like System Shock 2 and the BioShocks and the Deus Exes, if you want to lump them in all in the same group.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like this game quite presents as many varied scenarios or like different options or ways to tackle things as those other games. And it feels like I spend a lot of time running through really large environments, kind of doing the same thing, which is mostly a lot of scrounging and picking up scraps. Did you guys have a similar feeling, or does that change later, or am I a crazy person?
I don't
Or all of
think
the
you're
above?
crazy because critical reception was especially. I mean, you guys are probably aware that for most of my AAA games, a lot of times I like Jim Sterling.
Mhm.
I like his reviews, and he actually did not like Prey.
Yeah, I actually,
And
now that you bring that up, yeah, I remember that.
and so for me, it was interesting because after reading his review and kind of learning a little bit about like what issues he had with it, I decided that I didn't really want to go through with it. And then I heard Nate talking about it on the podcast, and it really did sound like something I would like. Yeah. So Jim gave it a 5 out of 10,
Okay.
kind of mediocre.
Yeah.
And he does use the whole
Yeah, I
scale.
think
So
he's one
5
of
out of
more of the
10.
ones that uses like a
Yeah.
5 from him isn't as bad as a 5 from
Yeah,
someone else.
like a 5 from Jim is like a 7 from another reviewer, like because he like
Yeah.
5 is average because it's halfway up the scale.
Yeah.
But so it took me a second to kind of get into it. I think the scrounging doesn't feel as bad if you like some of the stories that are going on, like because a lot of times if you scrounge, you also are learning about the different people on the station. The different like there are these relationships between people. Of course, there's the D&D group.
I just found that today.
That's
Yeah,
funny. Yeah.
there are these little stories that you're learning about in the background that are going on. But and I think it kind of depends a little bit, like whether or not you enjoy that kind of moment to moment stuff. Kind of just depends on how intriguing you find that content. And I don't think there's necessarily a right answer there. I don't think if you found it, I mean, of course, the content could be, it could always probably be more engagingly written or presented. But at the
Right.
same time, I think, I think I liked that. I think some of my qualms with the game were a little bit, there are actually times that, I don't know, the way Ryan worded it was like, the game being kind of at odds with itself. And I think there are some story beats that kind of came off that way to me as well. But I think I enjoyed kind of, I kind of enjoyed the scrounging, but it's hard to say because you do have a decent amount of freedom in the game. And so it's kind of like, which way did you go first? So one example of that would be, I won't say anything else about it, but there's a pistol upgrade. So you start with a silenced pistol and there's a way to get a better pistol.
Hmm.
And that was one of like the last things I did in the whole game.
Right. Yeah, I haven't come across that at all.
But of course, like there might be, and the only way I came across it actually is because after I finished everything I wanted to do with the game, but the main quest, I looked up to see if there were any main quest or side quests I was missing because I just wanted to see everything that was in the game, and it was one of the side quests that I had missed. So, but of course, if someone would have found that a lot earlier, they might have had a much easier time with things because pistol ammo is pretty easy to craft, and there's a lot of it. So, who knows, But
yeah.
so it's kind of hard to say. But I will say that, I think I mentioned on the podcast before, for me, in terms of the things that would probably apply to your playthrough, the wrench combat, I didn't feel like felt very good.
Oh.
So if you're doing,
Yeah, I don't
a
think the
lot of
combat
that,
in general in this game feels great.
So if you're doing, I mean, like you said, I mean, you may have a shotgun or you may have a pistol, but if you don't have any ammo for it and you're just using that wrench, to me, the wrench does not feel good. So that could certainly be having an impact on how much you are or are not enjoying it.
Yeah, I think my experience was somewhat similar in that, at the very beginning of the game, I guess, yeah, the way the game plays out and paces itself, is kind of odd. And, at the very beginning, you don't have any weapons, like you're seeing these aliens doing scary things. So, obviously that's kind of a section of the game, that they create. But then, yeah, it's kind of like transitioning out of that section is really rough. Like, for me, I wasn't sure if it was my talent investments or, like you said, if maybe you just don't have all the tools. Like, you get some pretty cool tools, and I found some interesting things to do, but the way the talent trees are set up, for example, you have things like repair and engineering, and I put points into that stuff first before I like upgraded any weapons or anything, because I was like, okay, well, maybe this game has ways to set traps, like repair turrets, like you can approach these, and I was playing on normal difficulty, so I was like, maybe I can approach these in different ways, but those didn't play out the way that I felt, so I transitioned to a more, what I felt like was a cookie cutter, like weapon build, and found that more easy, like cookie cutter, like stealth and weapon skills. And the game became, I guess, easier, if not more interesting, at that point. But yeah, I definitely had that early transition that was kind of rough.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that's, like, I don't know, I haven't really gotten super into the skills because I feel like a lot of them are, at least the ones I've been getting, which seem like some of the more powerful ones, have been more like quality of life improvement type stuff.
Yeah, like a bigger inventory.
Yeah, exactly. Like the fact that I'm spending skill points just to make my inventory better, it's like, that's not really like an exciting new thing to get. That's like circumventing an annoyance.
Right, right.
And I feel like a lot of it's that kind of stuff, or it's just like, because like the next skill I want to get is just like makes my guns deal more damage. I forget what it's called, but
yeah,
it's like, that's not really changing the game in any way. It's just making me more powerful in a straightforward way. And I also feel like that combined with like the very, I did get the Neuromod fabricator plans, but it still feels like I get Neuromods even with that really slowly. So it feels like my progression, it feels like my abilities change very slowly in that game. And
right.
I was trying to think earlier, like what is the biggest difference between like this and a BioShock or System Shock or Deus Ex or something like that? And the best answer I have right now, I'll have to see, think about it more as I play more of the game. But I think the best answer I have right now is it feels like my character progression is just slower and doesn't give me as like drastically different functionality as I'm progressing. So thus far, it's felt like I've gone on more long stretches of just scrounging, and that can get kind of old after so many hours.
Yeah, I think they're also kind of, there's something to be said. I mean, a space station is unique, but is it as unique as an underwater city? Or
a city in the clouds?
Yeah, I don't know. I think also, there was a lot you could do, like with respect to kind of like your plasmids and your tonics. In your BioShock, you kind of had these two different sort of pieces.
Yeah,
kind of combined.
Yeah, it feels like there were just more upgrade options in that game.
Right. Yeah, I can see where you'd get that.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to quantify. I mean, I do think there are some interesting things that the game does. Like, have you found the glue gun?
Yeah, that's one of the first things you get.
Yeah, I thought so. Like, I think it's kind of interesting, some of the things, some of those type things.
Have you made yourself some pathways, Flex?
Yeah. I like built a stair, like a glue staircase up somewhere that I wouldn't have been able to reach otherwise.
Nice.
Yeah, I think the game
good. Like, I think the glue gun's a good thing.
Some interesting tools, but then like you said, some of the stuff tied to your talents just. And I mean, I found some of the talents more actually useful towards the end game than I expected, but like you said, there's sort of a transition or progression that doesn't flow the way you would think or expect. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out for you, because I think there is a hump there.
Yeah. And I think I hope I've gotten over that hump. So we'll see how the game progresses from here. Well,
Yes,
anything else you've played that you want to talk about, Ryan?
Yeah, I'll do a couple quick plugs. I've been still playing World of Warcraft, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but my brother and I, we're getting to some of the late game content, so we're trying to figure out what to do next. So at this point, we were even considering like trying a new MMO or switching to like an ARPG for kind of our multiplayer jams. But what we actually did is we've been doing pickup groups for the newest raid, and Taurus. So we've been getting into pickup groups using Group Finder for the normal difficulty, which it's pug life, y'all. But it's actually been fun. Like,
are you at the level cap?
Oh yeah.
Okay, what is the level cap now?
110.
Okay.
What they do is they basically bump up what's called item level. So every time they release like a new content patch, they'll usually bump that up by so much, and so there'll be kind of a new soft cap based on your gear. But yeah,
okay.
So we've been.
I've noticed you. I feel like a lot of days when I see you on Discord, it's playing World of Warcraft. So I'm tempted to ask your hour count on that character, but you probably don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
What class are you?
I am playing a Goblin Warrior.
Nice.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing too. Is so a lot of times because I actually main spec a tank, so a lot of times these raids are looking for a tank, and my brother main specs a healer. So a lot of times they're looking for tanks and healers. So we really have to work those raid mechanics. And like,
right.
I think we're getting over the learning curve, but we still only cleared about half of it with pickup groups because some of those bosses are hard, and like, if you make a mistake, you die. And like, if 2 or 3 people do that, like the group basically starts to lag. And if I die as the tank, like the group just wipes. Like,
right. Yeah. I do like the idea of this tiny little goblin being a tank.
It's pretty great. But yeah, that's just kind of a fun plug. And raid mechanics, like when those are done well, like they can be a lot of fun, like, timing things like trading aggro and, powering out your DPS at certain points. Like, those, whenever I played Destiny and now in World of Warcraft, like it can be fun to have to deal with some of those kind of group mechanics. But yeah, other than that, just a quick mention of I think I had mentioned a few podcasts ago, I was playing through some Famicom games. I kind of finished the run that I have for now. So I finished Zelda 2, finished Metroid, and then I did kind of like quick looks, like one single recording playthroughs of Famicom Wars, a game called YY World 2, and a game called Valkyrie's Adventure. So I've uploaded some videos
nice
on just doing kind of quick looks of some of those.
What were your favorite out of that crop you just mentioned?
Overall, I think my favorite was probably Zelda 2.
Okay.
But I also, the last 3 that I played, I just did them in kind of quick settings, and they were games that I hadn't seen or played before, so that was kind of fun. Like YY World was this kind of, I don't know if you call it, it's almost like a action platformer type thing, and it's Japan exclusive, and it was kind of crazy and silly, so it was fun to just sit down for 30 minutes and play this like old school Konami platformer action game.
Did you see the blueprint for like newer Zelda or further? Like, could you see the blueprint for Super Metroid and the original Metroid, or one of like Link to the Past and Zelda 2?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I had played some of those games before, and I think that's why I liked those last 3 games, like the true Japanese exclusives. Like, I think that was why those were kind of more interesting But yeah, I mean, if you play Metroid, I don't like Metroid that much. Like the original Metroid is
it's rough to go back to.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
But I mean, you can see Super Metroid in that game. It's just they made it bigger and they cleaned it up. They got rid of a lot of the rough stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Like like the 8-bit, like it's hard to get the atmosphere right. Like there was a lot of grinding. Like it was a very steep challenge curve, and they reused assets because I guess they had limited memory, things like that.
Yeah, because the original Metroid,
all that stuff.
Yeah, it has a lot of long hallways that are literally the same thing repeated, and I have to assume that was a memory saving trick.
Yeah. So that's it for me.
Yeah, what's your last question? Do you have a lot of Famicom games left on your plate, or?
Oh, so that actually finishes up this at least. Right now, I'm not planning on picking any more up, but that was kind of the current run of games that I have. It's possible in the future I might try to grab, like, say, 3 or 4 more exclusives. I do have a couple of Super Famicom games, but I'm not, like, rushing to do those. Those are things like JRPGs that'll, I'll probably wait till I get some
Warrior
time.
3.
No.
All right. Well, I tried.
4, maybe 3, probably not.
All right.
And
game
how
I've
about
mostly
you, sir?
Yeah, I do video games. I like those. The game I probably played the most in the past 2 weeks is Prey, which we've already talked about. I have also been playing some of Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy.
Yeah.
Bennett Foddy of QWOP fame, which was big on the internet, I don't know, like 20 years ago or something. I don't know when that game came out, but this is kind of like, so QWOP is this really dumb thing where you use Q, W, O, and P, the letters that spell QWOP. Use those 4 keys on the keyboard to control this like Olympic runner's legs, like left quad, left thigh, right quad, right thigh, or something like that. Or yeah, I don't know what the muscles are, but it's like 4 different muscles, and you try and make them run, and it's impossible, and it's terrible.
But everyone is a winner.
Well, I don't know about that. If me running like half a meter and then falling on my face is a winner, then I'll take it. So Getting Over It is not as impossible to control, but it's kind of similarly simple and focused on just movement. So you play as this guy, this very buff dude who's not wearing a shirt, and he's wielding a sledgehammer, and he's sitting in like this giant cauldron, presumably to protect his legs. I don't know. But so you just see his torso sticking out of this cauldron, and he's wielding like this big 2-handed sledgehammer. And
he has insane strength.
Yeah, with his insane strength, all you do is you only use the mouse, and you swing the hammer, and you use the hammer to propel yourself wherever you want to go. So it's like you move this hammer to like hook on ledges and pull yourself up, or like push yourself along the ground, and like the whole game is climbing up these structures all the way to the top. And it's surprisingly enjoyable. Like I've been liking it. I don't know that I'll ever beat it because it's freaking hard. But there's a simplicity to the controls and the challenges that's kind of mesmerizing for me in a weird way.
So does Getting Over It ask the deep questions?
Yeah, so that's the other thing about it, is there's narration from him the whole time. And it all feeds into this theme, and like getting over it kind of, I guess, has multiple meanings in a way, because the most straightforward meaning is you're climbing over all of this stuff. So like the challenge of the game is getting over these obstacles. But a lot of the narration and the themes of the game talk about like what is like a meaningful challenge, and like what does it mean to get frustrated by something. So like I kind of interpret getting over it as being like if you suffer a failure or a setback, like being able to cope with it and get over it, if that makes sense. Like that, I think that's kind of the real meaning of the name and the theme of the game.
Well, and can you build a culture out of trash?
Well, you can build B culture out of out of B movies and B books and stuff, according to Bennett Foddy. Yeah, that's like one of his quotes in the game.
It's the wisdom.
Yeah, and he has a lot of quotes from other people too. Like he quotes other authors and artists and stuff. So like he has a lot of quotes like from Nietzsche or Shakespeare or whoever else. Like the tons and tons. Like the list of things you see is really long. But yeah, because like you're constantly climbing up stuff and it's hard, and then at some point, unless you're just somehow perfectly get through in one run, at some point you're going to fall and it's going to set you back and you're going to lose some progress, and that usually like will trigger some more quotes to kind of drive it home, I guess. But I think it's an interesting thing, and like it's fun. I think there's like just an enjoyment to the mechanics, and it's definitely not. This game would be the anti-Will or anti-Paul game because it's not a game you play to make progress. Like if you're hell-bent on making progress every time you sit down and play a game, like this game would drive you insane.
Although it sounds like Paul has found a great new game to fill that niche for him.
Yeah, Paul has found ways to make progress in video games reliably that involve clicking a mouse button.
Nailed it.
Yep. But yeah, I don't know. I've been enjoying it. I've been getting over it and enjoying it. The other game I played from start to finish, I played through Night in the Woods, which is a very story-driven adventure game where you play as an anthropomorphic cat. You're like a 20-year-old woman who has dropped out of college, gone back to your sleepy, small hometown, and it's a lot of just kind of reconciling with your life or your life from that town and like the people you knew there and what happens from there. And a lot of it is just like, I don't know, it's hard to describe because there's not like a central through line. It's just kind of like you're living your days and figuring out where you fit in life, or this character rather is trying to figure out where they fit in life. I enjoyed it overall. Like, I think the writing's pretty good. Like, that's the best thing about it. I think there are some really, really terrible mini games in there.
How would you compare it to something like what was that game? Trying to think.
Oxenfree?
Oxenfree, yes, that game.
I read your mind. Yeah, it's kind of similar in some ways. Oxenfree like starts off where you're like stranded on this island and there's kind of a mystery. Mm-hmm. This game is a lot more grounded. Like this game is like this game's story is all about these 3 or 4 young adults who are just out of high school, and they all kind of took different paths. Like your character went to college, some of the other characters stayed in their small town and are working like pretty mundane jobs. And it's kind of examining like how do people end up on the paths they do out of high school? Because like out of high school is like for most people when they start making choices about what they want to do with their life. And it's a lot of examining that. So it's more grounded than Oxenfree, which I think gets a little more sci-fi, I guess.
Right, supernatural.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you first go to college, it's like I remember one of the more stressful things was like people are like, well, you could take anything.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
You have a couple choices, in high school, maybe your senior year. It's like, do you want to take Latin or Spanish? But, you always kind of like take the next math class and take, or whatever. So I remember going to college and people were like, you can take anything. I'm like, what? I can take anything. Somebody tell me what to take.
Did you play Night in the Woods, Will?
I haven't played it yet. It is on the backlog of mine, but I have not played it.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because, I mean, I found that I liked Oxenfree more than I thought I would, but Night in the Woods I've been kind of on the fence about because, you know, like a story of dropping out of college, I mean, it could be very meaningful and, you know, they could explore some, you know, maybe that's a good decision, a bad decision. They could explore some interesting, like very real world things out of it. But on the surface, like if somebody says, hey, here's this story about dropping out of college, like that's not exactly going to be the thing that I gravitate towards unless it really does seem like it stands out or is impactful in some way.
Yeah. And it got really good reviews, and I did like it overall. I found it a little inconsistent. Like there are a handful of moments in that game that I thought hit really well. And a lot of that is due to the writing, and because the writing's pretty consistently strong. And when they get to those points where you've kind of interacted with the characters enough to get to know their stories, and then they kind of like open up and share more details, and you're like, oh, like now I understand this person and their life. Like those moments are effective, but then there's also a lot of moments where you're just kind of doing silly stuff and it feels kind of meaningless. And like there are parts of that game where I was like, we don't really need to have, like, we could chop some of this out and speed things up a little bit. So I felt like it dilly-dallied a little bit. And especially with like some of the minigame stuff, which is just, look, there's a really bad Guitar Hero thing in that game that you do multiple times. So
is that supposed to be what college dropouts do?
Yeah, apparently
play like Guitar Hero.
Yeah, you start a band
really badly.
Yeah, you start up a band and play Guitar Hero with your keyboard, and the timing is not good.
That's inspiring, Flex.
Yeah.
For some reason, that cracks me up. You're sitting there with your little cat, like hitting the button before it hits, and it's like, oh no, it didn't quite work.
I also thought the ending did not do it for me. I thought they kind of stumbled a little bit on that. But there are good moments in there. Like, I think if you like story-driven games like that, like Oxenfree or anything else in that mold, like I think it's a good game, and it has good moments. But it's got some parts of it that I didn't like a whole lot as well. I found it to be a little inconsistent, but
gotcha.
It was neat. It's no getting over it. That's the real game of the year.
Yeah, there's no Bennett Foddy.
No
DJ quotes.
I think that's going to do it for our games talk. We're going to take a short break, and then I think we're going to come back and briefly talk about Jeff Keighley's The Game Awards, which happened last week. And after a brief talk of that, we're going to call it a show. So stay tuned, and we will be right back. And we are back for more ATACS. This is ATACS episode 28. I am Flex, joined by Will and Ryan. We have talked about the games we've been playing, and now we're going to talk about the Game Awards, aka the Keigleys. This is the award show Jeff Keighley's been running for, gosh, I don't know, like 15 years or something at this point. And it's like he's trying to make, the Oscars of video games or whatever you want to call it. But that happened last week, and they gave out a bunch of awards. But oftentimes, almost more interesting is the announcements and trailers and stuff they show, because it's kind of like, this is almost in a way become like the mini E3 that's like half a year. It's halfway between each E3. So there's usually some decent announcements at these shows. So I was thinking we'd run through some of the announcements and trailers and see what sticks out, and then maybe mention some of the actual awards at the end, because that's really how they do it. Is they show a lot of flash behind trailers, and then they like off the side are like, oh yeah, these games won some awards, whatever. That's usually kind of on the side, which is kind of silly, but
Yeah, Jim Sterling has called the Game Awards the game advertisements.
Yep.
Just outright. He's like, and I watch the game advertisements.
Yep. They're really not about the awards.
Yeah.
But yeah, I basically have a list of a lot of the announcements here. There's a World War Z game, which I doubt any of us actually care about.
I read the book, and I saw the movie, but I still don't think I would. I mean, do we need more zombies?
I didn't even know there was a book.
Yeah, there's a book.
All right, was the book good?
Well, it plays. There's some interesting stuff. Like one of the things, and I won't talk very long about this at all, but one of the things is that in World War Z, the book, they kind of draw attention to the fact that in the event of a zombie apocalypse that was covering the whole globe, like we wouldn't really know what was going on with North Korea. Because nobody really knows what's going on in North Korea. So one of the big speculations in the book is these different, world leaders and countries saying, how do you think North Korea is dealing with the zombie apocalypse? We can't really talk to them because they don't talk to anybody. So I just thought that was an interesting take. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that'll make its way in the game?
Probably not. It's probably going to be. I would imagine it's going to be a little bit more geared towards the film.
Right.
Which also diverged a bit from the book.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's more zombies.
Yeah. Kill them.
We're getting Vacation Simulator from Job Simulator people, which that game looked like a decent VR game, but none of us have VR. From Software showed a 30-second teaser, which showed basically nothing. Kind of the default question is like, oh, is this Bloodborne 2? Because like the style looks like something that could absolutely be Bloodborne 2, but like there's really not enough to go off of in that teaser. They just show like this. They show like this really gnarly like drill, like wrapped in like something really bloody, like and like a bone next to it or something. Like it's just all right. It's gonna be something super gory,
amazing.
And dark, kind of like Bloodborne was. I mean, they said after Dark Souls 3 they were done with Dark Souls, but I guess they didn't say they were done with Bloodborne, so maybe? Or it could be something completely different. Who knows?
Could be.
There's really no telling. I mean, I'll definitely be curious because they've...
Just stoking the engine on the hype train.
Yeah.
Shoveling that coal in.
I mean, they've put out a lot of good games lately, so I'll be curious whatever it ends up being. The next game, probably one of the cooler announcements, is they showed a fairly lengthy trailer from the next Campo Santo game, which those are the Firewatch people. And this is called Into the Valley of Gods, or In the Valley of Gods, sorry. And it looked like you were climbing around Egypt and taking photographs. It looks like you play as a photographer.
Yeah, I am, for one, super duper hyped about this game.
Yeah, it looks cool.
There were so many amazing touches in Firewatch in terms of the way that I guess like the graphical design, the sound design, the voice acting, and I know that that team has a whole lot of talent. So yeah. I'm curious to see what they do.
Yeah, definitely. And the trailer, had a cool style to it, and they're, it's a drastically different setting and stuff from Firewatch. So really curious to see like where they take, because like you said, there's a lot of talent on that team, and I'm definitely curious to see where they take it next. Then there was a whole lot about Breath of the Wild DLC, and they showed off Link riding a motorcycle across Hyrule, which is ridiculous. But that DLC is already out. I don't know if I'll play more of that game or not, but Link can ride a motorcycle, y'all.
It does look like a rad motorcycle.
And does it? It's like got a horse head on the motorcycle.
Oh, doesn't it have a name too?
What's your point?
They gave it some.
I mean, if you're into horse motorcycles,
Zero.
I actually don't know what its name is.
I think it has like a crazy name.
Yeah, I would not be surprised.
Maybe you can play like some like sweet industrial rock tune on your ocarina, and it'll like drive in on its own. You know,
Master Cycle Zero.
Man, that is a really goofy name.
I
hope it does play rock though, as it drives.
Well, it is a Japanese game, so Master Cycle Zero sounds about appropriate.
Yeah.
They kind of sci-fi'd Zelda up. So when I first saw it, I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Well, I guess maybe the setting."
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of technology in that game's world. So I mean, it does kind of fit, but the design of that motorcycle is just so goofy looking. Next on the list, we have Soul Calibur 6 is coming, because you all need more Mitsurugi and Voldo, right?
I am actually excited about that.
Yeah, well, I think we have some lapsed Soul Calibur fans on the panel here.
Well,
I would be excited.
To me, the biggest issue though is just like the idea of playing Soul Calibur with like an online competitive scene. I mean, I've enjoyed it, but like I've still like I think whereas your first person shooters require an even better ping and connection than like turn-based stuff, I think fighting games are like one tier higher, you know.
Yeah.
So it always seems like, you know, you might be fighting against somebody from Brazil and like your moves are all laggy and stuff. So to me, like the potential is really fantastic. It just depends on whether or not I can like reliably get in low latency games online, because I do like learning the move system and running around with Astaroth and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean that is a big, like, Nate and I were playing some Nidhogg 2 last weekend, and like, I mean, in a way that's kind of a fighting game, and the lag wasn't terrible, but like every now and then I could notice just being off like half a second, and it's like that makes a huge difference in those kind of games.
Yeah, and we've done the podcast long enough that I can actually do a callback to an earlier William comment about For Honor. If you guys remember the criticisms I had of For Honor, I'm like, this is a melee online. They better get it right. And there were all these instances of people swinging swords behind people and who knows what else. So it really matters to get your online right, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, with fighting games as a genre, like, you know, the pros, like, they'll turn the game resolution all the way down, and they actually worry about like the response time on their joystick interfaces. Like, so I mean, with fighting games, you know, and I mean, I guess it's one of those things where even casual players, like you said, it does not take a lot of ping. You know, if the pro players are worried about how fast their joystick is talking to their console or their PC, like, you know, that kind of can show you how critical that stuff is.
Yeah, they're bringing in a new system, whereas before in the game, like, they call it like, I don't know, some sort of, it's not a guard impact, but it's almost like if you time a certain move, you can counter other moves with certain moves now or something like that. I can't remember the name of it. I watched the video on it. So they're iterating a little bit, which I think sounds kind of like an interesting thing. I was never good at guard impacting anyway, which is probably way too technical of discussion to get into right now. But anyway.
Yeah. Did you play? I mean, I know Soul Calibur 2 is, I believe, for all of us, the one we played the most. And I know Ryan played some of the later ones a little bit. Did you play any of 3, 4, and 5, Will?
I played, let's see, what did they come out on?
3 was PS2. I think 4 and 5 might have both been 360.
I think I played a little bit of 4 and 5.
Okay.
But I didn't play a lot of them.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I played a little bit of both of those.
Well, the trailer for 6 shows Mitsurugi and Sophidia fighting, so
yeah,
it's still Soul Calibur.
That should be fun to watch, at least on the trailer. I'm not sure how well balanced any of the games past 2 were. I think there might have been some balance issues with the characters. I kind of wonder if they're going to try to make a balanced fighting game, or if they're really concerned about the competitive scene.
Right.
I have not seen Link or Darth Vader in the trailer, so I guess characters not confirmed.
Amiibo support.
Yeah. After that, probably, I guess I don't know, in the general gamosphere, whatever you want to call it, like quote unquote biggest announcement. They showed that not only are they doing Switch ports for Bayonetta 1 and 2, but they then unveiled Bayonetta 3 is going to be a Switch exclusive and is in the works. So that was the first time anyone had mentioned Bayonetta 3. And it looks like more Bayonetta.
I mean, if you want to wreck guys with your hair,
if you want to breakdance people to death.
When you say it like that.
I mean, that is what you do, kind
of. That is 100% what you do. Yeah, I like Bayonettas 1 and 2 a lot. Like, they're goofy fun.
Yeah.
So.
The other things, I don't know if you mind me just diving in here.
Go for it.
Apparently there was some more details on Sea of Thieves, which I have been interested in ever since it was revealed. It's sort of a co-op pirate ship game.
Mm-hmm. That's by Rare.
Yeah, different players will kind of hold different roles on the ship, and it looks kind of cartoony and ridiculous and fun. Another co-op game that, of course, was actually more, I guess, more people were interested in what the developer had to say in the actual game, probably. But A Way Out, I have been super excited about ever since it was revealed. I thought that he had a really, although some might say he didn't have the lightest touch with what he said at the Game Awards, I think he really did have a good touch with Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, which was the previous game by the developer.
Yeah. So just quick context here. Yeah, they had a trailer for A Way Out, which they'd shown this game somewhere before, maybe E3, I don't know. But yeah, it looks, it's a co-op game that looks like it has some really cool ideas. And they had him out on stage, Joseph Ferris. And yeah, he was one of the leads on Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. And I think they had him out there. He was supposed to be talking about some kind of Friends Pass. Yeah, where if one player buys the game, apparently they can share it with another friend, and the friend doesn't have to pay for it. They can just download it and play it with them.
Right. Like a friend pass or something.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
But
instead of talking about this, the guy just went on a ridiculous 4 or 5 minute rant. And he was just like, fuck the Oscars, and he started talking about microtransactions with EA, and he just started talking about all sorts of weird stuff. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, it's the type of thing that happens when you have jet lag. Just kidding.
Is that what it was?
I forget what it was he said it was, but I think that might have been something he said. Also, there were two titles, one called Witchfire and one called GTFO, that conceptually look cool, but the previous games by the developer I didn't love. Witchfire is made by the folks who did what is it, like
Bulletstorm?
No, it's like something
Vanishing of Ethan Carter.
There you go. And I didn't love that.
GTFO, so it's by that team, but a lot of people on that team used to be at People Can Fly. People Can Fly.
So they do Bulletstorm
there is shared blood with Bulletstorm and Painkiller and those things.
Gotcha. Okay, so that looks good. GTFO is a co-op game, but it's made by the squad who did Payday 2, which was really cool. Was also a really cool game conceptually that didn't execute, I feel like, particularly well.
I'm with you there.
I saw Metro Exodus. I kind of enjoyed the first 2 Metro games, and Last Light and 2033. They have a kind of a unique setting, kind of a unique sort of scroungy first-person shooter, like scroungy, dirty first-person post-apocalyptic shooters. And so that's kind of a fun thing. So I'm interested to see that.
Yeah.
Edith Finch got Best Narrative, which I'm switching up a little bit, but I was very happy to see that. Unfortunately, I haven't got a chance to play it yet, although I did watch someone play it and found it to be pretty incredible. So
Yeah,
I was
I like
glad
that game.
glad to see that happening.
Yeah, I think that was a
good pick.
good pick. Yeah.
Then there was Death Stranding.
Yeah. So okay, before we get to Death Stranding, I was saving that one for the last of the trailers.
Okay.
Just real quick, they showed a trailer for Dreams, which is from the Little Big Planet folks. Which that game had not been we hadn't seen anything for that game in a long time. And they showed off the new desert map for Battlegrounds, which I guess will be releasing when the game officially releases next week. But yeah, so yeah, Death Stranding. That was probably the longest trailer shown.
Yeah, it was like 13 minutes or something.
Yeah, it was stupidly long, and it's it was, of course weird.
Yeah, totally incomprehensible for the most part. Don't really know much to say about it. It's just that I kind of wish Guillermo del Toro, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, that's how you say it.
I think he should just go make his own game. Just let Kojima keep it in Kojima world. Because it's just like so much talent and attention to detail and graphical prowess and high def textures, all in the service of absolute nonsense. And and that to me is just like, what a waste.
Yeah. The thing for me, I'm at the point where I'm just about convinced that there actually is no game, because these trailers, like you said, they're so elaborately produced and there's so much detail in them, and they're putting out new trailers every E3 and every Game Awards, and I feel like that has to take their entire time, right? There's no game actually being worked on here. It's just they're just a trailer company at this point. They have not shown they've been showing trailers of this game for 2 or 3 years now, and they have not shown a single bit of gameplay. And these trailers are long. They're.
You got these little solar powered windmills on your spacesuit. Just a mess, dude.
Yeah, it's real silly looking. And then, of course, there's a baby inside the dude's belly.
I haven't seen any of the Death Stranding trailers or Stranding, whatever. And I think I'm probably happier for it.
Yeah, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, I think I'm good. If it comes out and gets a good review and looks like it's worth playing, I might look at it. But I think
that's the thing for me is they've done so many of these weird trailers. At this point, I just want them to put the game out, because until then it's just going to be continuous weird trailers, and who knows what the game's actually going to be. It was also really hilarious watching the awards, because watching Kojima and Norman Reedus and Del Toro all walking out on stage, broing out, arm around each other's shoulders and fist bumping, they're just totally into the whole thing.
We built this nonsense together.
Yeah, it's and then Norman Reedus is basically worshiping at the altar of Kojima as he's speaking. He's yeah, it's such an incredible to work with this guy. He's a genius. He's such an artist, and he's it's come on, dude. Do you even know what's going? I bet Norman Reedus has no idea what's happening in this trailer.
Well, the funny thing, Mads Mikkelsen said as much. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but I believe it.
Yeah, it's
that's great. This feels like Kojima Unchained.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone needs full Kojima.
Yeah. So there's a Polygon article, came out February 28, 2017. It says, the headline is, Mads Mikkelsen had no idea what Death Stranding was about after Kojima described it. Yeah, Mickelson said when he sat down with Kojima to discuss the project, the game developer tried to explain the entire plot of Death Stranding. Even with Kojima's best efforts, Mickelson admitted he had no idea what was going on. Which is just fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Apparently, this is one of the actors that's going to be in Death Stranding for anybody who doesn't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he's supposed to be in the game, and yeah, I mean, yeah, Kojima's stuff I've watched entire playthroughs of the Metal Gear Solid games, and I don't really know what's going on in those either. And this looks even crazier than that. So
there you go.
Yeah, they spent a lot of time on that.
Oh boy, but we'll
see what it is. I'm still going with a MOBA. It's going to be a MOBA.
Yeah, or a battle royale game.
Yeah, could be that too. I could see it.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's pretty much all the announcements. As for the awards themselves, I don't think we really need to read through all of them. I mean, I could if you want to. I would.
Let's not. It's actually kind of funny too, because I watched the awards last year just as kind of passing interest, but I know that they have mixed reception. Like, I guess, that kind of centralized take on gaming, like an Oscars for gaming, I think most people are pretty lukewarm at best, if not openly hostile to that idea. And I thought it was kind of interesting and entertaining, but this year it's like, I don't know, nothing about it seems that exciting to me. Like, it just feels like a bad idea.
I will say that I think most anticipated game is an absolutely stupid category.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, really, you win that. I mean, because at the same time, I mean, maybe otherwise No Man's Sky would have never gotten an award. You know what I mean? So maybe it's good. I don't know if No Man's Sky won, but if it didn't, it should have.
Yeah, I don't know what won those years. The Last of Us Part 2 won that this year.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fan voted. So most of the categories are actually voted on by like industry people. People, like I mean, Jeff Gerstmann is one of the people who votes. It's critics from all the sites and magazines, like the standard ones. But yeah, there's a handful of
Sky got it in 2015.
Yeah.
So good
thing these
you
guys that also got it in like 2014.
I guess.
I think BioShock Infinite got it multiple years in a row because it was in development for so long. Also,
I think. I mean, I don't know for sure the history of the Game Awards, but I think the awards maybe have always been the weakest part of it. But yeah, I mean, just scanning through a list like this year, it felt like, kind of an industry bros thing. Like, they made some really obvious picks, and then they also were trying to find ways. So I think Overwatch got an award for best ongoing game, and it came out 2016.
Yeah, that was last year.
So
which I think all of the nominations for that and that was also their game of the year last year.
Yeah, so it's like, do they just need to pat Blizzard on the back to make them feel better? It just, I don't know.
Think that one's probably, I don't know if they did that award last year, but that one's probably, I would guess they made that award in response to the fact that games, the whole games as a service thing, because games don't come out and are done anymore. They keep getting updates. So my guess is that's probably their reaction to the fact that games are constantly getting updated. Because these are the award categories do change over time as gaming trends change. But the awards themselves I generally don't care about, even though I like seeing what the winners are just to kind of have an idea of because it is voted on by industry people. So it does show you I guess what the whatever you want to call it, the consensus, the most agreed upon, whatever, the thing that the most people like, which the game of the year this year was Breath of the Wild, which was no surprise because that's what the vast majority of sites are giving their game of the year anyway. But some years it's not quite as obvious, and some of the other categories are maybe not as obvious either. So sometimes it's interesting to see that stuff, but in general, I agree that the awards are not really the highlight of the Game Awards, despite the name. And Jeff Keighley will, I assume, continue his quest to make a mainstream accepted video game award show until the day he dies. And I don't know if he's going to succeed or not, but he's going to keep trying. And he's going to keep showing Death Stranding trailers till the end of time.
On that note.
Yeah. Anything else from the Game Awards anyone wants to mention? Otherwise, that might be a show for this week.
Yeah, I will say that maybe we can briefly touch on what we're going to work on next.
Yep.
And
what you got coming up, Will?
For me, I think I'm going to continue working on probably going to continue working on a little bit of Grim Dawn, and maybe some more Everybody's Golf, which is terrible.
Word.
But I mean, it's not terrible.
Who's golf
it's just,
for, Will?
I don't know. Everybody.
Okay.
Ryan and I might start Door Kickers, which recently got a co-op patch. In terms of single player, I'm probably going to start Hitman.
Nice.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
curious what you think of that game. I think you'll like it.
The latest one?
Yeah, the episodic thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that game's good.
Mm-hmm. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah. The first time you throw a fire extinguisher at someone's head is magical.
Sounds good. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah. What you got coming up, Ryan?
I just started Mario Odyssey.
All right.
This evening or this afternoon, and I think there are ghost pigeons wearing top hats, so the game's already
right.
starting off on the right foot for me.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of hats in that game all around.
So aside from that, that's probably going to be the big one. I'll be doing some traveling for the Christmas holiday, but I might try to squeeze in some PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
There you go.
If it comes out, if it gets a true release, I might try to slide it in under the radar just to have it under my belt for 2017.
Yeah, I think December 20th is the date they've been saying. So,
We'll see
Wednesday?
if it happens.
Yeah, today's the 16th. So
I don't
we'll
know
see
if I'll
happens.
make it. I don't know if I'll make it there, but maybe if I sneak out Odyssey and I have a few days to spare, I'll try to get that one in.
Get you some moons, play volleyball or whatever it is.
Yep. That's a thing you can do in that game that you probably shouldn't do.
We don't talk about volleyball, right?
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, let's. Anything else?
Oh, for me,
if you do get Battlegrounds, let me know. We can do some duo or even team if Nate wants to jump in too.
That would be cool. But that's it for me.
Nate and I, speaking of, did play some Battlegrounds last weekend. Did not get chicken dinner, but we played it.
Disappointed.
As for me, I will continue playing Prey, and I may start SteamWorld Dig 2 soon as well. Those are the main two games I'd like to try and play before we have our Game of the Year talk. I don't know. Hopefully I'll be able to get through most of them, if not all of those two. But
gotcha.
And we are doing a Game of the Year talk in about 2 weeks, and we will somehow decide on our favorite games of the year. And there have been a lot of games this year. But for this episode, ATACS episode 28, I think that's gonna do it.
That's a wrap, folks.
Mm-hmm. I have been Flex, joined by Will and Ryan, and we are going to sign off. And we will see you next time on ATACS.